Hi, and welcome back to Made Possible by Pop Culture, where every episode dives into two distinct but similarly important pieces of pop culture from my guest's life. My name is Danielle Terciano, and this week my guest is Lovell Holder, a writer, director, producer whose debut novel, The Book of Luke, was released at the end of 2025. So if you haven't read it yet, you'll definitely want to add it to your list now. And obviously, I've read it before talking to him. So we will get into some story points, not all the spoilers. I think you might want to read it and come back, or maybe start listening and then read it and then come back. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But first and foremost, of course, Lovell, thank you for coming on the show. Happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm so honored to be here. It's such a delight, and thank you for having me. I think the premise of the podcast is so cool. So it's
Oh,
an honor to kind of be here chatting about kind of foundational text for my own work. So it's great. I'm thrilled to be here.
oh, good. I'm glad you like the concept because that is also sometimes people say they want to come on, and then when I give them the concept, it takes a while to get a decision back. And I'm like, uh-oh, maybe it's not for everyone,
I
but
know
that's good.
I'm a big believer in citing one's sources. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Nice. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about your book. And for those who don't know what the book is about, I'm going to attempt to summarize it right now so everyone
Please.
gets excited. But I
Yeah.
want you to jump in if you don't like how I do it because I didn't know a lot about it when it was pitched to me, but it was kind of pitched to me as a reality set in a reality show world, but it's really this man finding his life again. And the
Mhm.
main character is someone who went on a reality show when he was very young, had very important relationships to him then. One turned into his marriage, but at the start of the book, something happens in the marriage and goes bad, and he decides, oh, I need to get money quick to fight for my kids, and I'm going to go back on this reality show. And I do want to also say for everybody, it is a gay relationship, gay man and his husband on the show. So there's a lot of nuance involved as well in those relationships. But the reason I'm setting the book up this way is because, and we will talk about this, I saw a lot of influence of a reality show in the way the reality show was written in the book based on the challenge. And maybe that's true and maybe that's not true. But when I read the book immediately, I was like, oh, he's going to be great for this podcast because he cares about pop culture. He gets these things.
Yes, no, and I think the connection to the challenge absolutely 100% intentional. I love the challenge so much. I think I've been watching it probably since I was 12 or 13.
Mhm.
Like definitely before the turn of the millennium. And I had a brief kind of respite when I was in college and grad school where I just wasn't watching really anything as much as I had been in my adolescence. But when I moved to LA in, I guess it would have been 2012, I was kind of home one night. I had nothing to do, and I saw, oh, because I think it was honestly the exact same week. I saw both The Challenge was still airing and Survivor was still
Oh,
airing.
sure.
And I was like, oh, I'll dive back into both of these pools. And I just dove all the way into the bottom of said pool with both franchises and have not looked back since. And now I'm lucky enough to call people from both of those worlds friends and colleagues. And yeah, but all of which is to say, in the book, not to spoil anything, any references to hurricanes.
Yep.
I mean, the first season of The Challenge I ever watched was the first, I guess, Battle of the Seasons, which
Mhm.
took place in Mexico, and all of production was stopped by a hurricane, but they kept filming with the cast. And that was my first experience, really, of reality television in many
Okay.
ways. It definitely informs lots of key moments, certainly in Luke's flashbacks in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely some of the actual challenges as well, especially
Mhm.
how you wrote the way the show within the book changed so much from when he was on in his
Yeah.
early years to today. I was like, oh, I see that. I see that in the evolution of that specific show, but in reality TV in general and the way that production, and this is something that, maybe we don't necessarily know for sure because we don't work on those shows, but
Yeah.
the way that it feels like production is manipulating certain things and the way that you go there in the book, which I appreciated. which I do want to get into, but I do want to start. We didn't pick the challenge for your past
We did
influence.
not.
So
Mm-mm.
I do want to start there. I try when I can. I don't always succeed to start in the past, but let's have you set up what you've selected by setting the scene for us for the year, the place, the time in your life when you stumbled upon this for the first time, what it was and what it was to you at that moment.
Of course. So the work of art that I have selected is the PBS recording of the original Broadway production of Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine. And I vividly remember the first time I was exposed to this. I was 12 years old. My family had taken a ski trip over Christmas, and one of my Christmas presents was the recording of this on a VHS tape. And my parents knew that I really was getting into musical theater at the time. And I do think in retrospect, this was also my first Sondheim just in
Hmm.
general. So great introduction just across the board. But I think they picked Into the Woods specifically because it is for anyone who doesn't know a mashup of all these different fairy tales. Cinderella is there, Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood. Um, and amidst all of this, you also have a baker and his wife who are just trying to have a kid. And the only way they can do that is by reversing this magic spell that the witch next door cast upon them. Um, and it's just this brilliant like conflagration in the first act of all these stories in this really clever, witty, funny way. And then we can get into this later in the podcast in terms of certainly how it ties to the book and really anything I do. Act two takes a very profound turn toward a very dark place. And
Right.
anyone who might have seen the Disney adaptation of Into the Woods about 10 years ago, which of course it's beautifully acted, it's Meryl Streep, it's Emily Blunt, Chris Pine, Anna Kendrick, genius performers. I will always feel, just to speak frankly, great resentment toward that adaptation
I get it.
because they really sanded off the edges that make this story so special. Because for me, as a 12-year-old watching this, it was my first experience narratively of something where the stakes change on you midway through.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, a character you love can die. They're not coming back. Like by the end of Act Two, it's been kind of a total bloodbath of all these fairy tale characters, but not in a way that's at all cheeky or snide in the way that, like, say, something like elsewhere in Sondheim's canon, Sweeney
Hmm.
Todd is. It's very poignant. It's
Yeah.
very heartbreaking. It's suddenly all these people are wrestling with questions that we all, I think, wrestle with at every stage in our
Yeah.
lives. And for me, it was my first time as a kid sort of getting those questions handed toward me in a way that I really understood. I mean, one moment, as I said, I was just watching it back right before we hopped on the mic, and there's this great moment between the witch and Little Red Riding Hood after, without spoiling anything, a big character has just died, and Little Red Riding Hood is going about how we have to kill the giant, we have to kill the giant, and but then the witch says, "Great. Well, the only way to do that is to give her Jack. She has come down here for revenge on him killing her husband." And she says, then the witch says, "We have to kill Jack." And Little Red Riding Hood says, "We can't do that." And the witch's response is, "When did you get so squeamish? How many wolves have you carved up?"
Hmm.
And she responds, "A wolf's not the same." And the witch serves her back, "Ask a wolf's mother." And it just kind of the questions it poses just continue to resonate with me to this day. And so, yes, all of which is to say, I skied during the day, and every night on that trip, I just watched that VHS on
Okay.
loop because I was just so my mind was blown.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting hearing you talk about that because I feel a lot of the things that you're saying about this project, I felt about Rent. And they're very different
Mm.
plays, but
Yeah.
just the way that you connected with it and the things that you kind of got from it, and also the way that you then felt about the adaptation, I was like, oh, okay. I see some parallels here, but I also see some deep parallels to like the messaging in Into the Woods to today? Like you're saying it still resonates with you today. I think even if you hadn't seen it, I think there are a lot of people maybe listening to this who hadn't seen this exact version,
Yeah.
who if you go back and you watch it today, it really feels ripe with what's going on in politics today. And we're not here to get into politics. This isn't that kind of podcast, but the song in Act Two about like, well, whose fault is it, especially?
Yes.
And what you said certainly too about like Ask the Wolf's Mother, but there's so much there's so many interesting things I think to fairy tales when you flip the points of view, like
Mhm.
who's the hero, who's the villain, what version of the story are you telling, the Disney version versus the Grimm version versus this version, and certainly like this version lets you see so many different points of view as it follows all of these different characters that I think that's something that I don't know that I noticed when I was a kid watching it. I will say
Yeah.
that I personally, the first time I ever saw it was like a regional or local theater production that my friend was in. So maybe not the best version. No
I
offense
don't
to
know.
her.
I think with the exception of Disney, I've seen so many productions of Into the Woods at every level. It's kind of a foolproof show. So I'm still convinced that whatever you would have seen would have still been resonant in some way.
In some way, sure. I just don't think, I think part of the difference is also we're talking about a PBS version. We're talking about a filmed version. And I do think it's easier sometimes to connect, and this is maybe just my personal bias, but I think sometimes it's easier to connect with something you see on a screen because the camera's directing you to a close-up of something to look at.
Mhm.
Whereas I used to have to see a play multiple times because I was looking everywhere and missing moments
Sure.
here and there. And this is a little bit different. There's not a million characters on stage at all times, but between that and then also like listen, it was like a local theater. My friend played Little Red Riding Hood because we were young, and so I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
just don't know how good everybody in that production was. They're no Joanna Gleason, they're no Bernadette Peters, and it's like what you're talking about is the original Broadway cast minus
Mhm.
like one or two people recording that aired on PBS. So like
Yeah.
it was legitimate performers, amazing performers, and then this amazing story too. And I think that's part of it. You don't. I never want to tell somebody that their first experience of a great work of art, as you said, it's not just pop culture, it's art, should be, a lesser version. And so like if I had said like, oh, the movie was my first experience, we both would have been like, ugh.
Yeah, I've had multiple people. They're like, "Oh yeah, I loved it." And I was like, "Which version did you watch?" And like, "Oh, I'm not sure." And I was like, "Was Meryl there?" And they're like, "She was." And I was like, "Wonderful. She's the best, of the best." You watched the wrong version.
But exactly, exactly. You mentioned obviously like a big part of your conversation was the fact that Act Two gets so much darker. And
Yeah.
I wonder when you first sat down when you were watching it for the very first time, how that might have affected your expectations of what you were about to see. Like, did you know going into it what this was? Because it felt to me when I watched it the first time, the end of Act One felt like the end. And then they were
I
like,
thought it was the
intermission. And
end.
I was like, huh?
I thought it was the end. I had no idea an act two was coming. Because I was like, I can't remember if my parents were watching it with me or not that night, but like definitely I was like, as they're getting toward like the third midnight, like they've solved it, the old man dies,
Yep.
the witch transforms, and we're off to Cinderella's wedding. I thought, oh well, that's the ball game. That's it. And so when the intermission card came up, I was like, and the narrator's like, to be continued and happily ever after. I was like, what? What? What are we doing? Wait, there's more? And boy, was there. Um, and it is kind of funny because that was something in Book of Luke that I did come back to repeatedly, especially when I was starting the book, but also when I was wrapping the end of the first draft up, was that kind of feeling of Act Two starts once upon a time later. Because for Luke, he kind of does have these two once upon a times at the very beginning that do parallel each other before they then go off on these very different tangents in the flashback and the present. But funnily enough, I did originally, and I ended up pulling it out because there were just too many quotes that I was using for epigrams. I did
Mhm.
have a quote from Into the Woods at the very preface of the book. I had the moment where the baker says, how do you ignore all the witches, all the lies, the false hopes, the goodbyes, the
Mhm.
reverses, all the wondering what even worse is still in store? And then you would go straight into the book with him finding out about his husband's affair.
Right. That's interesting. It definitely sets up a little bit more of what's to come, I think. 'Cause I feel like I wasn't as fully prepared for the affair to be right at the top of the book as maybe I should have been. But that's me. That's just me going in like
Oh, no,
saying
no,
I want to
no.
go in kind of blind. Like I don't really want to know. Like I didn't even read the back. I was like, I
Oh,
just want
good.
to read and I just want to see what happens.
I think that's the perfect way to go into anything. Like, I think there's so few opportunities in the world to be surprised these days. I think at least when it comes to works of art. So if you can seize upon one, embrace it, go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously you were young when you first saw Into the Woods, so I don't know if this is a fair question, but I always like to ask these types of questions anyway because there are so many themes in the show and in the play about like the parenting. And you're young when you're watching it, and I personally feel like a lot of times when you're young, you're trying to identify with the young characters.
Mhm.
There aren't really, there's one really in this one. So I'm curious if you had a feeling about like, well, who was there somebody you felt like you identified with on that first watch, how that maybe evolved over your future watches, and how much you really cared about that central, like, not just we want to be parents, but also the struggle of the like, am I going to be a good parent? Am I really ready? Like those pieces
Yeah.
that would come up.
Well, it's funny, and I don't know what this says about me, that right from the jump, I identified with the witty, clever, middle-aged woman. So of course the baker's wife
Okay.
was my
Well, also
instant.
it's Joanna Gleason, so like
Yes,
you
and
have
you
to.
can't beat Joanna Gleason. But she was absolutely my immediate entry point into it. And I think probably just like, I don't know what the right psychological term for it is, but just like the power of suggestion. I felt like I then just started incorporating more of her personality like into my daily life in sixth grade and just like speaking patterns, rhythms, like I
Mm,
very deeply associated with this kind of middle-aged woman wanting to have a kid. But it is funny how that has grown and developed as I've gotten older, and I think the things you don't even know about your own sexuality at that age of like as I kind of came to my own understanding of myself as a gay man,
mhm.
um, the baker and the baker's wife, of course, take on a different tenor in terms of having children, this
Yeah.
and that. And even I know just because I come from theater and independent film prior to novel writing. And like I always knew that if I was ever given the opportunity to direct a production of Into the Woods, the version I would really push to do would be one where it was in fact two bakers or two female
Mm,
bakers, but
hmm.
like a couple of the same gender,
Yeah.
because how else could that couple have a child but by magic? And so, but I think, but those seeds were planted very early on. And so, yeah, I think the baker's wife, even until I'm probably like late into my elderly dotage, the baker's wife will always be my primary touchstone going into that play. But it's funny with some distance from it that you find the secondary characters that like you get caught off guard by.
Mm,
Sometimes I'll really be identifying with Cinderella and just like kind of the nobility of her journey at the end where she doesn't want the castle, but she doesn't want where she came from. She wants something in between. Um, and so I think, or even Jack, like really during the pandemic, I found myself thinking about Jack a lot whenever I was driving cross country a lot
oh.
because I didn't want to fly because I didn't want to catch COVID. There wasn't a vaccine yet. I wanted to see my parents.
Mm,
And I kept thinking of that line that he has in Giants in the Sky, which is he's coming down the beanstalk and he says he sees the roof, the house, and his mother at the door. The roof, the house, and the world he never thought to explore.
mm.
And you think of all of the things you've seen and you wish you could live somewhere in between. And so I think it is a musical that we revisit at different chapters of our lives and new things ping in a different way.
Right. I mean, I think that should be how it goes. I think if you,
Any great work of art, yeah.
yeah, or any person who's willing to grow and change. I think if you're just like very stuck on, I'm always going to watch for this one thing, I don't really want to tell you you're doing it wrong, but I do think you're doing it wrong. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
should be looking for, if nothing else, and it sounds selfish, but I don't think selfish is bad. If nothing else, how does it relate to you today? And if it's the same as it related to you 10 years ago, like look at your life because your life
Mhm.
shouldn't be the same.
Yeah.
Um, I think similar to that, like I found such an interesting, I don't know if this is something that you really thought a lot about or cared a lot about, but there's a really interesting idea, I think, of like, as you just brought up with Jack, the in between and Cinderella, like not wanting what she had and thinking about what she wants. The fairy tale versions we usually get as kids tell us like, oh, you meet the prince, you get married, it's happily ever after. We don't
Mhm.
ask about what comes next. Obviously, this doesn't do that because that's pretty much like act one, people get what they want, and then there's a question of like, are you content? And art is content enough? Like, is it really happy? Is it contentedness? What is it? Like,
Well,
what is that line
and I
too
would
of
say,
like,
is content sustainable?
okay, fair. Yeah. And but I would say even like beyond the degrees of happiness, what is looking into the like the what of what's making these people happy and saying like, is this something that is yes, sustainable, but I would also argue maybe like the good kind of happiness, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense. Like not a greed, not something for greed, not something for, status, but something that is going to actually be for me.
Hmm.
I mean, are those things that you used to think
I think
about when
that
you were watching the show, or am I crazy?
I think it absolutely resonates, and it very much informed the book of Luke as well, as I was saying
Mm.
with the back end. And I'll do a little, just if you haven't read it yet, some spoilers to
I
follow.
was gonna say we were definitely gonna get there very quickly, and I'm gonna ask you questions that you can choose how spoilery to talk. I'm
I
not gonna ask you about the ending, like things like that,
No,
but yes,
I think, well, I'm about to talk about the ending. So I
great,
think, it's been out
great.
there too. It's been out there almost 2 months now. If someone wants to press pause and listen to this after then great. But I think it's if it's been 2 months, we can do some spoilers.
Okay, good. I feel that way too, but then I
Yeah.
do know that like people tell me all the time I read fast, and so I do kind of feel bad because I'm like, well, if somebody is a slower reader and it's just like on their nightstand, yes, I agree. Maybe pause this and then come back.
Yeah. But I think I feel like there's been enough time. It's okay. And I'm excited to talk about it. But I was gonna say the ending of the book is actually something that I've been thinking about Into the Woods a lot in relationship to, because I've had many readers come up and like really whole full chest being like, I love that it's such a happy ending. And my question back to them always, really? Great. I think it's certainly, I think Luke believes it's a happy ending. I think he's gotten his happy ending. But I think in many ways, without him realizing it, he is at the end of Act One of Into the Woods,
Hmm.
because he is making some choices here where he is going to find out what happens after Ever After.
Right.
And I think and I hope I have the opportunity at some point to revisit these characters and do another book in this world, because I feel like to I will say two images from Into the Woods that I will invoke. There are definitely seeds coming from a beanstalk that are planted, I think,
Okay.
in the book, and that beanstalk is going to grow. And I just think about the final song in the show, which is Children Will Listen. And when,
Hmm.
spoiler, he makes the decision to put his children on reality TV, I can't help but think of Bernadette Peters there, center stage, saying, children will not obey, but children will listen.
Hmm.
Children will see and learn. And I think there's a big difference between having a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old
Hmm.
around a camera crew and what that means when they become a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yeah. And I think also just to speak on what people might be saying to you when they say, "Oh, we're glad it's a happy ending." I think it is more about like not necessarily like I don't know that people because I wasn't thinking about what that might do to them later. I was thinking very much about like what they just got out of. And
Yeah,
out of all of the outcomes that could have happened from him going on the show and the very physical challenges that they compete on this show, which I keep waiting in real life for some one of them to go terribly wrong and they never do, but in your book something does go much worse than
yeah.
I thought it would. And so like all of the outcomes that could have happened, it did feel like okay, he got the good end of that
I
stick.
think so. And I do think it's a hopeful ending. But I think the question that I do always kind of pass back to people, as we were just talking about, is like the sustainability of it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. But I also do think too, just even when he's presented at the very end of the book with the opportunity to go back on the show again, I also do think of top of Act Two when they say into the woods, it's always when you think at last you're through, and then into the
Mm.
woods you go again to take another journey.
Yeah, well, but that's also this world, right? Like that was how for so long what he knew, how he made money, etc. And then now he's back and I would argue there's no one who can kind of completely push aside the high of being on that show and doing well on a show like that. Like it gets its claws into you. And so in a way it's like that's always that temptation's always going to be there to quote, make reality TV your life or quote, make reality TV your career. We see it all the time. There are
Yeah.
career players on shows like The Challenge. And I don't want to say they don't literally do anything else because I see them do other things, but I know how much this show has taken other opportunities probably from them because of how much time you're devoting. So I mean, I think when I think of like it being a happy ending, I not only from the possible outcomes, but also just in the sense of like, well, this story is closing here. And
Mhm.
so like I feel good about where it's closing
Yeah.
for now. Like every book, I feel that way. I'm like, you're gonna close the book, it's gonna be perfect forever, or play or show or whatever. But yeah, I mean, again, like for the sustainability of that moment, it felt.
Yeah, totally.
I do want
100.
to go backwards because we just talked about
Yeah,
the ending of a book we
yeah,
didn't talk about. Okay. I actually want to go because we started talking at the beginning of this conversation about like the challenges influence, but I kind of wanted to back that up even further and just ask about where the book started for you. Was
yeah.
it with the character of Luke and like the romantic struggle he was about to have, or was it with the idea of I want to tell a story about something with reality TV and the way that it can shape your life?
Yeah, no, honestly, the honest answer is neither,
Oh,
which was the just the funny outcome. So it actually began I started writing the book in 2019. And I don't know if you felt the same way, but I think for me when I look back on the 2010s as a decade, I remember them as a in many ways a rather kind of ruthless, cutthroat decade. It felt like people were very much
hmm.
out for themselves kind of shamelessly in a way that I don't remember the 2000s or the 90s being in the same way. Uh,
Okay.
and so at the time, I was very interested in kind of this idea of complicity and how underrepresented communities were in some ways oppressing other underrepresented communities. Like it just felt like there was no sense of solidarity wherever you turned. And so I started writing a book that was ironically enough rooted entirely in the world of politics.
Oh,
And
wow.
as I started doing research into it, and like all the major characters were kind of there in some capacity, but like Luke was purely just a political spouse. He never left DC. Imogen was a journalist, all this stuff. And I realized very quickly as I did research into various political movements, stuff like that, it was a terribly unfun place
Hmm.
to be living. It was very bleak. I was like, there weren't a lot of opportunities for humor. And it just, even just the idea of writing it as I was outlining it
Hmm.
felt like such a slog. And I was like, well, how do I take this conversation that I want to have about complicity, which isn't the most like sunshiny topic to begin with, and make it something that like people actually want to consume and enjoy and follow along to the end without maybe realizing that there are some vitamins in the mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
And the answer that came to me was reality television because it is just one, a great vessel in which you can throw people from different walks of life, and by virtue of the exercise, they're forced to be together. But also, two, I do think, and I don't think this is about as uncontroversial a statement as could be made about the topic. Reality TV and politics have become very intertwined in the last 10 years. Uh,
Hmm.
just as a statement of fact, many reality TV alums have risen to very high positions in the government. And consequently, I do think that opens up a conversation where I knew nothing I put on the page would be as extreme as whatever is going on in our daily lives.
Hmm.
And so I just felt this incredible license to really drive the car wherever I wanted to do it. And once I had shifted into the reality space versus purely politics, the book kind of just came out flowing very easily. But what was interesting that I do want to cite, and I've spoken about it a little bit in some other interviews, but I was really kind of hit by COVID in
Mm.
the middle because I had two-thirds of the book written when the pandemic came down. And I'm a coffee shop writer. It's very hard for me to write in my apartment. So that final third really came out like blood from a stone.
Wow.
And it was not until probably a year into COVID, February 2021, that the first draft was completely done. But I think that ended up being such a gift because I do think there was a cultural shift throughout 2020 in terms of just even basic masking and ways in which we could
Yeah.
help our neighbors. The whole movement around Black Lives Matter, things like that, where I just felt more of a coming together as a nation in that moment. And I think for me, even just subconsciously, I realized when I stepped away what it began was a book about complicity. What ended was a book about forgiveness.
Hmm.
And a lot of the characters had originally been destined for much more punishing ends. And I just realized, like, as I was rounding the bend, end of 2020, end of 2021, I couldn't put them through that anymore. And I became much more interested in how do we take these people who have pushed each other to the brink, but still are choosing to go on together? How do we investigate how relationships sustain even after considerable trauma and
Hmm.
offense?
That's a really interesting thing to hear you say that they were destined for worse ends
Mhm.
in this version, not in the political version, but in the reality show version.
Well, I guess it would have been it was kind of like an unhappy ending for certain people. There would have been a one-to-one version. But like for example, Sean as a character, who for those who don't know, is one of Luke's love interests in the book.
Mhm.
There's a moment about two-thirds in where you find out a big revelation about Sean. And originally, that revelation was going to be that he was totally a grifter. He had been using
Oh,
Luke
I see.
entirely for
Okay.
attention, and he was just trying to make a quick buck, and there was nothing sincere about his affection for Luke at all. And just having written the first two-thirds, by the time I got to that moment, I was like, I still need to split them up, but that can't be the reason anymore. It doesn't, it was too hard for me as a writer to put them both through that.
Hmm.
Like I had actually grown to really enjoy Sean and be like, oh no, he does mean it. Like he's got secrets, he's got his demons, but his feelings for Luke are true.
Hmm.
And I realized I just couldn't bring myself to discredit that because it felt like it would have been denying senses of hope and possibility that resonated throughout the whole book, far beyond just that character.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't want to get too spoilery, so I don't even know if you want to answer this question, but like, I think about his journey and like what we learn about him. And there are things that happen to him
Hmm.
that I think would you have still put the in there if he was just a grifter? Because I feel like a lot of what we learn about him even later after they're broken up, it really does make us sympathize with him more. And
Exactly.
okay.
And none of that would have been in there had he been a pure grifter. It was like
Okay.
all those kind of subsequent, the entire final third of his arc all came from making the decision of I can't put him through this. I still need to justify how I got him to the position he's in, and I now have to justify it through a totally different means. And then it was the light bulb of like, oh, well, this would be why he would be
Sure.
there.
And to be
Um,
honest with you, that makes him, I think, a richer character. I mean, I don't
I
know what you
agree.
would have done with him revealing he's a grifter if you never see him again. But I think this adds more nuance and more emotional complexity, not just to him, but also to like Luke and what he decides to do with information that he has and relationships that he's pursuing or not pursuing. And that to me is like what you want out of a book like this, or at really any book. Like I want to be tugging. Like I want heartstrings
Yeah.
tugged and I want to like not know exactly what's going to happen and I want to not know exactly what I want him to do in a way as well. Like I
Sure.
think sometimes I read a lot of books and I'm like I know exactly where this is going and I'm still going to read it to see if any pieces of the journey surprise me, but it's when those pieces do that
Hmm.
makes that book more interesting, but I think it's even better when you can't, like look that far ahead and know exactly what's happening and why and how.
Oh, I completely feel the same way. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started this out, I did not in any way expect that I think Sean is the character who is most changed by the events that transpire in the book. And I actually think that actually ended up being a really big gift because he's the one who is most changed by Luke and Luke's actions. And regardless of whatever choices Luke makes for himself, his choices definitely trigger dominoes that
Yeah.
allow Sean to do very different things than the character you meet at the top of the book.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up obviously forgiveness as a general theme in the book, but there's some very important characters from Luke's past. And I would argue not just his friends from the reality show, but also I would even say his husband. Like,
Oh, for
obviously,
sure.
there's the question of like, do you forgive after somebody cheats on you that way? And I want to talk through the levels of forgiveness I think that you felt like you wanted to have in the book in terms of, again, you don't have to say the
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
to who he forgives because people can read the book, but I'm just curious about kind of finding the balance of like who he forgives and also how you space it out in a way, if that makes sense, because it's like it can't all come at once. That's not realistic. Maybe some of it, some people who are jaded like me read it and go, maybe some people don't deserve it ever. How did you fight through some of those thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, well, it's funny because your question did just make me instantly think of the baker's wife and Into the Woods having her dalliance with the prince. And she's like, this was just a moment, one peculiar
I
past.
don't really think this is the same. Just for
But
anyone who
exactly,
hasn't
but I was
read
gonna
this book
say,
yet.
yeah, no, because I
Okay.
was gonna say, I think if maybe Barnes, the husband, had been, it was a one-time thing. A prince was walking by in the woods. I was overcome. I think Luke could maybe overlook a moment in the woods, but no, no, unto itself, it's a whole forest. There is just this cavalcade of men that Barnes has. I mean, if we were sending Barnes to a therapy couch, it's like, are you a sex addict? Maybe. You might
Maybe.
be. You should
And
investigate this.
yeah, but to be fair, like that is a disease, and I don't want to be over here being like people with diseases shouldn't be forgiven. I didn't read it that way. I just kind of read it as like,
No. Well,
oh,
and because I
he's this
also think,
politician, he's high on his power, and here
yes.
we are.
Well, and I also think he alludes to being in therapy, and Luke is very adamant. He has no interest in hearing about Barnes's therapy. Like, and so I think there
True.
was a moment where, because it's a first person narrative, because I'm not interested in hearing about Barnes's therapy as the author, neither is Luke, and we keep moving on. But I do think one of the things that was important to me, that did come out of, I think, kind of the kind of subconscious kind of ruminations that were happening in 2020, like we were
Hmm.
saying, is that I think the boogeyman doesn't always go away. Like, I think we're living in a time right now where everyone is very quick to sort of isolate themselves from someone they don't agree with, just kind of like, we're throwing up all the walls, circle the wagons. And the simple reality is, we are all stuck here together. No one's going anywhere. And kind of to that point, after one of my dear, dear friends, the author Sash Bischoff, whose book Sweet Fury is terrific, if anyone hasn't read it, when she read the first draft of the book, she was adamant that Barnes should be killed. She was like, he needs to die. Like, what, like, he needs to go. Like, by the end of this book, I need a body on the floor. And that just always felt too easy because sometimes the boogeyman, you have to stay and raise kids with him. He's not going anywhere. And I was also just intrigued by, yes, what if he is this terrible husband, kind of a repugnant politician, but what if he is a good father? Because I think we all have these things where we all have both our great gifts and our great
Sure.
blind spots. And I think the most interesting villains and antagonists, to take it back to Into the Woods, I think of the line the witch says, I'm not good, I'm not nice, I'm just right.
Yeah. I
Um,
I will say, out of the three things you mentioned, good father to me doesn't trump. the bad of the others to say, "Oh, you definitely couldn't kill." I laughed when you said she wanted him dead because I was like, "That's normally my response." But then I'm like, "But no, because then when they're dead, they're always great in death." You know what I mean? Like the
Yes.
kids remember this great man that they don't understand why their dad isn't mourning, or the some of the politician stuff that he did that was bad for trans people will get forgotten about because he's no
Yes.
longer here spewing hateful rhetoric. Sometimes you have to see the hateful rhetoric to be like, right, bad person, we can't write them off. They're
Yes.
a danger, and we need to remember that they're
Well,
a danger.
and putting him there to also kind of have the opportunity in surviving to start maybe trying to undo some of that stuff, as he and
Hmm.
Erica kind of do at the end of the book.
I don't know that I believe he's good enough to, but maybe that's where your future book can come in. We'll
I,
see.
I will say about Barnes, I do believe that, not to get too into politics, but I would say if Barnes were in 2020, 2025, if there were a political figure that he would probably try to say that he was most accurately represented by, I'm not saying this would be the case, but I think he would perceive himself as wanting to be more in line with a John McCain or Mitt Romney
Oh, sure.
than
Okay.
any of that. Like I think,
I mean, they're not great. So that's all I'm saying. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
but I do think, but in
they're not
terms of the
positive
spectrum,
change.
I do
Sure.
think he would. I think he would be trying to distance himself from the way the
Sure.
political landscape would be moving, which was part of the reason why I set the book in 2015
I
specifically.
was going to ask you about
Yes.
that because I was like, it does feel like, first of all, it's a lot of times, like if you're chasing the clock of what's happening now, you're never finishing this book because you're revising and revising and revising. But also, it does feel like a nice, we can all remember the time before
Well,
and
because no
just
one really knew, no one
breathe.
knew what was coming. And I think because I felt like to set it after 2015 would have been to look too directly in the sun.
Right.
There's no way that it doesn't come up in every conversation. Um, and so I think by setting it in 2015, which was also the same year that gay marriage became law of the land, it just felt like, because I think it was still a moment where people were still kind of saying whatever they thought they wanted to without having to understand that there were consequences coming.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
when we read it in 2025, knowing the consequences. And also,
yeah,
honestly, like the way that you stacked the book with like characters who, the things that he said and the things that Luke didn't really publicly decry, then they're faced with people who experience those things. And people were a lot nicer to Luke in that reality house than I thought that. I mean, they know they're on reality TV. They know they may get a villain edit. There's a lot of reasons, but
mhm,
I don't know that I would have been so nice in the beginning because I don't know this man, but I do know what his husband stands for.
yeah,
Um, I do want to talk about that a little bit because the show itself, I mean, I had kind of alluded to this at the start of our conversation, just in terms of like production manipulation and getting involved and things like that. I also know that there's also a lot of times where the actual players are trying to manipulate things, and certainly in the flashbacks, we see Barnes manipulating things. So we know, like politics aside, this guy always had that bone in his body. But I do want to talk about how you structured the game, the players, the producers, like how, I mean, obviously you're a fan of reality TV, you already said that. So it's less about the research and more about just for you, like
yeah.
creating that environment, the process of creating that environment, like where you started, how you kept it all straight in terms of where people were in given moments and in the competitions too, like where you went to create what those competitions were, because that is such a beast on its own.
No, totally. And the outlining process for this was very different than anything else, any screenplay, anything I've ever done before. Because normally I just have a very linear Word document. It's like boom, 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 boom. And I did have that for this, that very much outlined the emotional arc that Luke had to go on. And then I had an Excel spreadsheet. And the Excel spreadsheet was every single episode, how every single person voted. Um,
Wow.
oh, and all that information was originally in the first draft of the
I
book.
was gonna say, yeah, it feels like maybe that's something. I mean, I don't know that we didn't need it. It was a very
Oh, my
fun
agent would
follow.
assure you, you did not need it. I'll never forget because I sent her the draft twice as long as the book is today. And she very, very astutely said, "Right now, you're showing us the rehearsal. I need
Mm.
to see the performance. It's great that you know how the two Russian characters vote in episode 6. I don't need to." And I was like, heard. Yes. And I did need to know that. I think I did need to know that because all that stuff led to
Right, because
moving
it
the
has
character
to make
forward.
sense. Like without you knowing it, it's easy to make a mistake at the end, and a reader will pick up
100%.
on that. A reader will be
Yeah.
like, "Wait a second, how's that person still here?" And then you're like, "I don't know."
Oh, I mapped out a full production calendar of like, okay, he leaves on this date, boom, 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 that episode ends, turnover, that's a day off, like arch it all out. So that even when he's just saying to like Andy and Wallace, his kids on the Zoom calls, oh,
Right.
well, I'll see you in 2 weeks. It's like, yeah, that has to fall with
Hmm.
the real world schedule has to also align with the production schedule. And even though time might move more differently on a reality show in terms of just by virtue of not talking to as many people, the relationships just become
Yeah.
more intimate more quickly. It still needed to all fit together into that puzzle. And I did not want to ever see in like 20 years just passingly online, this detail is wrong.
Yeah.
I did not, the work was double checked
Okay.
multiple times.
So when you talk about this Excel spreadsheet for the way people voted, is that also then how you built the competitions, like what
Yes,
they were, and like did it matter to you what place everybody came in, even if
yes,
that's not in the book? Okay.
that mattered very, very much to me because it also, I wanted the competitions and the challenges to mirror whatever was happening emotionally to people at the time. So like spoiler, when Melange exits, and she's a character who when you meet her seems like she's all about artifice. She's all about her makeup, she's all about her wardrobe. That when she goes out, it's with a of her own volition, dunking herself with a tank of water that kind of is this sort of baptism that strips her away of everything she's been hiding behind.
Hmm.
Um, and so really trying to make sure that like again, a spoiler, like when PB goes, he's not eliminated. The man who says he will never quit the show quits the show.
True.
Um, and setting up, okay, believably, how do we put those people in the position that the kind of satisfying arc, both logistically and metaphorically, aligns?
Right. I mean, because it is a lot of characters to keep track of. It is
My
a lot of
father would say
characters.
too many. My
I
father
don't
said,
know, no, no. I don't mean, I just, it's a lot of characters also to care about. Like, that was the one thing I was surprised by reading the book. I was like, I feel like some of these, it was obvious we would care about Imogen. It was obviously we would care about Erica. Like, there are characters there that are structurally built for Luke to have, you
yeah.
know, a growth with. But then there were so many others where it was like, well, we all know how reality TV goes. Some of these people are expendable. And I was surprised by how few felt expendable in the book.
Well,
They all
good. Oh, I
felt
think that's
like
a great
you,
compliment.
yeah,
Thank you.
I was like, you all felt like you cared about them. Like I knew they were going to have to leave. And I was like, obviously, and it's really more about when and how versus I'm sad that they had to go because obviously you have to set Luke up to like get pretty close, to, if not to the end. But that was what I found really interesting because I will say that I don't often find that with actually reality TV. And I don't know if it is the edit or the actual personality of the people that I just don't like. But there are so many shows where I watch where I'm like waiting for someone to leave.
Sure. Well, I think I also, for myself, just even thinking with if the premise of this is it's an all-star season, then all those people do have to be all stars for a reason. We have to earn why
Yeah.
they got invited to this show in the first place. And that was something that Jackie Young, my editor, was very good about with like even someone like Jimin, who figures emotionally, but kind
Mhm.
of intentionally removes herself from kind of the scrum of the gameplay. Jackie was like, well, we need to know why she would have been a
Yeah.
threat anyway that would make people nervous. And then it was like, oh, well, puzzles. She'd obviously be good at puzzles. And Jackie was like, yes, make sure that that's put in there. Even if we don't see her doing puzzles, we talk about them fearing her doing puzzles.
Right. Because it's happened before.
Yeah,
I don't mean to harp on this, but I also do because it's my favorite part about reality
please.
TV.
Yeah.
Like the challenges when people get sent home. So many times for me, and I will speak as somebody who used to actually write about the challenge and have interviewed those people a lot. Sometimes it feels like based on who is going in, they stack the actual competition for who they want to win. And they claim left and right, no, 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 we don't, we know, we plan in advance, we don't know. Fine, I'm not here to contest that. I'm not here to
Yeah.
fight them on that. But you, on the other hand, do know. You know exactly who's going to go in and who would come out. successful. And so I'm curious how that affected what you were writing. If you found yourself kind of writing things that characters would have to overcome that they wouldn't be good at because it's more emotionally satisfying for the reader, or if every now and then you're like, we just need an easy win here.
I think everything you said is true. I think it also was about I'm always intrigued by people losing something that they should win
Mm.
or really, really powering through when everyone is underestimating them. Like I think like to pull an example from the challenge, one of the most compelling challengers to me will always be Devin Simone. Um, One, she is, I think, the only person who has played that game multiple times who has never been voted off. She has never
Oh,
been eliminated. She has been on the show twice, and she has made it to the final both times because her social game is just that masterful.
I was gonna say she also knows when to get out though. Like if you have a record like that, now she's hosting the reunion.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
like, that's
exactly.
the
Yeah.
smart play.
Yeah, well, and also she very astutely, because Devin and I have chatted a little bit, and she's been very public about the fact. She's like, well, why would I keep going on a show that could break my face?
Yeah.
This is the money maker. This is
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
I say that all the time. I've said that to challengers before. I'm like, I always ask them why they come back. And sometimes the way I say it makes them understand I don't think they should come back, but never for the reason of like they're not good enough, but more for the reason of like, why would you put yourself through that? It's
Yeah.
awful.
Well, and I think with Devin, what I admire so much about her is obviously the social game. She knows how to deliver a line. She's a phenomenal narrator within the show. She's so funny, which is why she is a good host, both on podcast and
Mhm.
on screen. But when she competes in that second final, and not one where she's there in a team, but it is just her going up that mountain, and you're watching her just sob, recounting, and like she will say to this day, like no moment in her life has changed who she is more as a person than going up that mountain. Um, because she was like, no one thought I could do it. And she's like, just having like the cameraman there beside me being like, you can make it, and they were like they were going to try and pull her off because a storm was coming in,
Mhm.
and they were and she was like hell, and she found like the final things to get up there, and even though it was a third place finish,
Still a
she
finish.
finished.
Yeah.
She got money. She has won prize money both times she's been on that show. And I just those are the types of narratives that I find really compelling, of someone who you think is there for one reason, and then they realize they can bring something else to the table. And I do think like Melange is a great example, that like when you first meet her, she thinks she's just there to make TV moments and fight with her cousin. And like as she said, Endeavor is a sports drama. The dicks bring the sports, the chicks bring the drama. And then by the end of it, she's getting this recognition from Imogen, like the
Mhm.
sole like athletic lady there, saying, no, no, you're good. You've got something here.
Right.
Um, like those are the types of moments that interest me.
I mean, I would argue even that's true of Luke
Yeah.
in the sense of, I mean, like obviously he's the main character. He has the most to go on in terms of a journey. But I mean, going in saying like I'm just doing this for money because of my kids, I need to get custody of my kids, and then being faced with Erica, who's we haven't even said this, like he had this relationship with this guy back in the day, and Erica is his sister, and she's trans, and like there's this really emotional mind. I'm gonna say mind fuck. I'm allowed to
Yeah.
curse. You're allowed to
Yeah.
curse. I should have said that up front. Like it's a real, like it's a that's a whole other level to what there is for the show because
Mhm.
it's you need forgiveness for something that happened between you and the brother Arjun years and years ago. You're faced with his sister who you didn't know was his sister when you come into the game. Like there's all of these other things happening. And then also just because he's been out of the show for so many years, and I'm not going to say when you go off reality TV for a long time, there's no way you can come back physically, emotionally, whatever. But I do think it's a lot harder because these other people who are career players like Imogen, like you've been training, you know how the show has changed, you know how to train your body and your mind to adjust to how the show has changed. Regular reps in the gym are not going to cut it.
Mhm.
So like to me, like that, the minute you had established all of that, I was like, oh, there's a lot here for this guy. Like this
Yeah.
is Not it's everything. It's a complete transformation if he is going to get to the end, not just of this show, but the end of this story and win these people over, win these people back, have friends, learn for himself that he wants them as friends and can have them as friends, put
Mhm.
all the stuff in the past to bed. Like it's a lot. This is now going to sound like a really flippant, reductive question, but I'm
Wait,
just always curious about this from authors. How do you choose the names of your characters, especially a character like Luke, and then naming the Book of Luke, which sounds very biblical?
yes. No, well, it is funny. So, the original title of the book was something different. It was originally called The Linebacker.
Huh.
Um, and one of my best friends, the screenwriter and director Ian McDonald, who wrote Woman of the Hour for Netflix, I Ian and I went to grad school together. I produced his first feature, Some Freaks. Um, I had given Ian and his wife, Julia Max, who's also a very brilliant director and writer, an early draft of the book for their thoughts. And Ian, they invited me over to dinner. They had printed off the full copy, put it down in front of me. And I will never forget, Ian just said, circled the title. And she's like, wrong title, not this. And I had titled one of the episodes within the Book of Luke, which still stands. The episode where
Okay.
he does
Yeah.
all the horrible stuff in the past
Yeah.
was
And
was
I mean,
always
so he was always Luke, and then the
yes, he
title
was
came second. Okay.
always Luke. And that was there. And because reality TV episodes often have very flippant titles, I had like cheeky, punny, I had titled that The Book of Luke. And Ian like flips to that page and goes, "That's your title. I promise you that's your title." And I was like, I think so. And then I even thought, because obviously, as you know, the book that Luke loans Arjun that comes back at the end, I also, okay, there's a nice double meaning here too.
Mm.
There actually is a physical book that Luke owns that is in play throughout the story. But so that was where the title came from. But I will also say I did not mind the biblical allusions because I will say the minute I was like, okay, we're committing to this to the title, I did go back and read the Book of Luke, kind of like, okay, just because I will probably be one day asked this, like, can I back it up that
Oh,
these are
I wasn't
canonical?
asking it because I can't back it up. I haven't
Oh no,
read
no, no,
the
no.
Bible that way.
I
So,
have like in the last like even just at in-person events, I've had readers be like, who I think do identify as very religious, being like, so can I look forward to this parable or this allusion there? And I was like, in some ways you can. If you want to find the parallels, they're there because there are lots of stories in the book of Luke about like I think one of them is the shepherd who goes back to get the one sheep that strayed from the flock and bringing it back in. Things like that. I'm not saying it was done with great intentionality. However, if you want to look for parallels, if you were in a college English class and were like, okay, compare the Book of Luke and this novel, you could do it. You could
no,
do
no,
it.
no. It was literally just because when I first Googled it, the first thing that came up was like, do you mean the Bible? And I was like, no, I mean the novel. And so then I just put novel after it to make sure that it's a whole thing.
During the cover, because the publisher was like, well, how do we make sure people know they're not putting the Bible? And I was like, put two men kissing. They'll know.
That's
They'll figure it
true.
out
They
real
will
quick.
know it's not the Bible, or
They'll
it'll
know.
be someone's new Bible because it's better. Oh
Although
no, I
it
get a
is
lot of letters.
It is funny that when we were doing the cover process, a whole different text that got invoked, separate from the Bible, um, was Patrick Legere, the brilliant cover artist who did the cover. It was such a dream process, and like I had so few questions or notes at every turn, and like we had a version that we were all happy with, and like originally the letters, rather than being like straight on, were at an
Mhm.
angle like this, like they were
Mhm.
receding into the horizon.
Okay.
And I shared it with one of my best friends, Pete Plazik, who's an actor. And this is why you sometimes need a wonderful straight man in your life. His response was, "It's beautiful. Everyone's going to think it's about Star Wars." Luke
Yeah, I was
Skywalker.
just wondering if it looked
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
And that had not occurred to me or anyone else on my team who are pretty much entirely women. And we were all just like, oh, yeah.
Only
Make those
because of
letters
the
dead
name
on.
and then
Make those
the,
letters
yeah.
dead on.
Yeah. I mean, listen, first of all, that's not the worst thing to be compared to.
I do
If
think those
someone
Star
picks it
Wars
up
fans
and
would have
then
been really disappointed.
I don't know if they'd be disappointed. They'd just be like, "Oh, this is something different." And, that's okay.
But if
I
they
don't
just bought it without reading and like, oh, which planet are we?
know. That's
Eastern
true.
politician.
That's true. People don't have a good, and I was the one that said it. I didn't read the back first, I on purpose, but that is true. A lot of people have a track record of just like picking the cover. And
Yes.
so it might have, yes, it might have sent the wrong message. It's
Um,
okay.
but I also will say, in terms of naming all the other characters, I really actively, if it's a major character, I try to make sure I'm not naming it after anyone who's close to me in life.
Okay.
The one exception in this book is one of my best friends. Her name is Jenny, and I did say to her, "Hey, are you okay with his sister being named Jenny? It's kind of come out organically. Um, she doesn't do anything bad. She's
Yeah.
great." And Jenny was like, "Cool, awesome." But one of the things that I've always appreciated about Shakespeare, is that if you look at like Twelfth Night,
Mhm.
all the key characters have some version of the same vowels and letters. So like Viola, Malvolio, Olivia are all kind of riffs on V's, O's, I's, L's, and
Mhm.
A's. And so it was kind of important to me. Like I thought Barnes, Imogen, Arjun, the kind of three figures that Luke is pulled between, all kind of having some similar vowel sounds in there to kind of do that. So that's one like super nerdy, speechy thing.
No, that's really cool because I always think it's the opposite. I always feel like a lot of people I know that write fiction do pull names from people, at least first names, from people who are in their lives, but they're maybe not writing books where people are doing these terrible things.
Sure.
So I think that also is, and also, listen, I'm going to say terrible things. Nobody is a murderer in this book. So
No, no, no.
there's a degree. This is not a thriller. There's degrees of bad things, but it's reality TV. So like you can imagine what things happen. And I also do, before I let you go, have to ask you one
Please.
nitpicky question
Yeah.
because I'm curious if the tape recorder, there's a very important tape recorder in this book
Hmm.
that comes up for, capturing some of the bad things that are happening in this house. Was that a play on the notebook from the challenge? Because there was I don't remember what season it was.
I know what you're talking
Kayla
about.
got kicked out because she was
Michelle,
taking notes. She had a
Michaela
notebook.
was taking notes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she got kicked out of the show. And in this case, the tape recorder becomes more important because of what is found on it, and so it's helpful to production.
So I completely see the parallel. If my math is correct, I actually think I had written that before that season was filmed or aired.
Okay, that's
Which
fair. I don't remember what season it is, and I'll be
okay, I
honest with you, like
believe
I have no sense of time in terms of if it was 10 years ago or five.
I
So,
think it's Spies, Lies, and Allies, or like as a niece, it's like Spies, Lies, Burgers, and Fries. Like the one where it's just like
yes.
the rhyming
Great.
has gotten out of control. So I think that would have been season 38. And so I'm pretty sure because it has been funny to see because the draft has kind of been fixed for so long. Publishing is such a long journey that
Right.
um certain things kind of like have now kind of the book has forecasted things that have happened on the show. So like for example, Melange felt like such a different character than anyone I'd seen on the challenge. But when Olivia appeared in like season 38, I was like, oh,
Hmm.
you're very similar to me. Like when she first appeared, I was like, you're kind of a Melange
Yeah,
to
I
me
see
in
what you're
terms of
saying.
like where her hair was at the time and like the vibe
Yeah.
and the one-liners. But even it was funny because I had just met Sydney Siegel. We'd been connected by our mutual friend Scott Yeager, who hosts Challenge Mania with
Mhm.
Derek Kaczynski. And I had sent Sydney a copy of the book, and then the finale in the most recent season, season 41. There are a lot of similarities to the
Yes.
final in this book that, like
Yes.
that section that was written 4 years ago now. And so I did message Sydney after I'd sent it to her because I was airing. I had just sent it to her, and then the episode there was like, just so you know, I really hope the end of this book does not trigger PTSD for you.
I also, yeah, but what's so interesting about that is so I had read the book before I saw that episode based
Uh,
on the timing of like when they sent me the arc and then I get screeners, but still not that early. Um, and it was similar, but I still think Oh, I'm gonna get shit for this. I feel like you might have created a more complicated one because of the key element. There's keys to, for
Yeah.
everyone who hasn't read this book, there is a key element to the final challenge in Endeavor in the book of Luke. And I feel like because of how ripe that is for sabotage, that adds an extra level. Like, I'm not going to say that I could never do what any of these people do. I say it all the time. I could never have gone up that mountain. I would have crapped out so long before any of them had. I still don't understand how any of them did it. And I will say this on the record. I still think it almost makes women look harder, look worse that Olivia won because she won pregnant and great for her. But the rest of us who don't want to do hard things when we're not even pregnant now look like big babies. So
Yeah,
anyway,
but
but so all I'm saying is I think because you added that extra element, I was like, I am glad there is something else. And then obviously something goes wrong in yours. Thankfully, nothing went
yes.
wrong in the challenge. I just think that like I don't, there are similarities, yes, but like no one's gonna look at it and be like, it's the same.
No, no, but I do think Olivia is she's such so fascinated by
She's
Olivia.
great. I'm so proud she won.
Oh
She
yeah.
deserved it.
Well,
It
but
is
also
a true testament of what you can do. But I'm like, well, when I have my period, I don't even want to get out of bed. And she's trudging up this mountain not knowing she has a baby growing in her.
well, because I think it also gets back to Olivia's conditioning. She's from Alaska. So she's
Yeah.
grown up just biologically, has been at a higher altitude for her entire childhood, adolescence, development. Like her body is conditioned to extreme heights in a way that a normal person's isn't. So I think
And the weather.
that's, that is
Yeah.
her secret superpower in that, like, she just is able to drop in a different way, endurance wise, that certain people, like, who like are down in the lower 48 just probably haven't been conditioned in the same way. But I also, even back to what you were saying about thankfully nothing's gone wrong on the challenge.
Well, like to the degree that it went wrong in your book. Let's put it that way.
Oh
Because
yeah,
again,
but
I'm
I
not
mean,
going to spoil what went wrong, but like I wasn't expecting that because that would be, I don't think a show could recover from that if that happened in real life.
well, and I mean, I think it's a real miracle for the challenge, Olivia with that golf ball, because like
Mm.
one more inch
Hmm.
over,
Hmm.
she would have been killed. Like, and I think, like, not to get into the weeds of the challenge, but I get very I when 39 was airing, and I've never met Olivia, to be clear. I hear she's
Okay.
lovely, but she's not one of the stars that has I've connected with. Um, I felt so awful for her with 39 because
Yeah.
I think people were shitting on her so unfairly because yes, she did some stuff that I think she was not proud of on the show. This was all within less than a year of what was truly literally a near death experience, and like at the very minimum an incredibly physically scarring one where she had to go have all this plastic surgery to restore her face, could very easily have been killed through no fault of her own. That takes a psychological toll, and then suddenly to be dropped in here back in the mix of all this and to not have had that affect you, I, that's a superhuman expectation. And so I do think the public should have granted her a little more grace in that moment of saying, this woman is clearly going through something.
Yeah.
Maybe now is not the time
That's
to
fair.
pile on.
No,
Um,
that's fair. I think it's hard. I think sometimes people forget between season to season.
yeah.
It's hard to be like, oh, right, that was not that long ago.
Well,
That
and I
just like it's that was really bad. Like maybe it didn't look as bad as it was. I can't look at any kind of blood on TV. So the minute she pulled her hand away, I was like, nope, I'm not looking at this. I know it's bad. I don't need to see how bad it is.
no, I mean she is so lucky because I mean if
No,
this
you're right. If it was like a little bit over and hit her eye
would
or
have gone through the
something.
back of her skull.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it was effectively going as practically as fast as a bullet. And I will say I really appreciated on a recent interview because I do love Michaela. I think she's so good for the show, but she was kind of diminishing it and saying, "Oh, well, she had an
Mm,
accident with a golf ball," and I was so proud of Devin and Davon. They just slapped in and were like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Have you seen that footage?" And Michaela's
right.
like, "Oh, I haven't," and they said, "You don't understand."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Devin, like very explicit, just like she could have died.
Yeah.
Like let's you two have your back and forth, say whatever you want, but that is one thing that you cannot come for Olivia.
Right. I mean, it is. I mean, listen, some other players have played injured, but like that's not the same thing. They're not even letting you play. Like the minute they tell you you're done,
Hmm.
it's really bad. Like that was even worse than maybe some of the other people they've pulled out of the game. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I think that's also something that needs to be taken into consideration. Like they very rarely, I feel like pull people. I would have pulled Michaela out when
Oh,
she
for the
twisted her
ankle.
ankle because how are you going to let that woman go up that? I know she wants to, but
Mhm.
that seems like such a liability. I don't know what they've signed legally. I'm like, I'm glad you didn't get into the weeds of that in the book of like the legality of stuff because I was like, that's where the fun goes away from
Well,
these shows when you realize what they must be signing their life away for.
what I've gleaned just from conversations, but also just like listening to other interviews, producers will always err on the side of pulling somebody. Very often, it is the contestants hiding it so that they don't get pulled. So, like in Olivia's case, it happened on camera.
Yes,
There's
you can't
no,
hide that. Well,
you
you
can't
would
hide
never
it.
have been able to hide it anyway. Her face was dented.
Exactly. But I know that very often, like Derek has been very transparent on
Yes.
season 40 with his knee and everything, or sorry, his ACL. I'm terrible with anatomy, but like he knew for
Oh,
a
longer
bit
than
of
we knew.
time that
Yeah.
there was trouble going on. He like has been very upfront about saying that had he even won that elimination against Corey, he would have said, with all due respect, I would like to go out on this win. Please let him stay. I need to leave. Um,
Sure. But there are also, I mean, I've just seen things where like even Michaela wasn't hiding the ankle. And so like
yeah.
for me as just like a very cautious person, and a very litigious person on the other end, I was like, I mean, I can't imagine that the producers felt good about letting her go up that mountain injured like
Yeah.
that because you're on your hands and knees crawling. Like at some
Mhm.
point, if you're just dragging your leg because you can't move your leg, you're gonna slip and you're gonna fall. So like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
crazy.
Well, and I'm gonna ask, is just because you clearly are such, you know the scene,
Uh-oh.
Danielle. I was just gonna ask, what are your current thoughts on Traitors?
Oh, I love. You mean, well, so we're taping this end of January. This episode's going to come out in February. So I've only seen the first six episodes at this point.
We're at
So
the
if you're
same
asking
spot.
me
Yeah.
specific questions about like how I feel about players, I do want to say that might change in the
Uh,
episodes that are to
sure.
come.
Sure.
But I will say I felt very bad for Ron, and I said this publicly on Instagram a few days ago because he doesn't know the housewives. And the minute Portia said what she said about like I killed, we killed. I was like, this is the woman that thought
That
the
should be
Underground
Portia.
Railroad was a real train. She's
Yes.
just Portia. Like she misspeaks all the time. You know, like if you don't know that about her, you are going to, and that did feel very suspicious. But if you don't know that about her, you're going to grab onto that and only that. And
Yeah.
everything else is going to be used as evidence to back that up. And that's misinformation. So I was like, I felt very bad for Ron. And I will say, like, I don't know everything that Colton has been through. I do know that he's been through a lot. I'm sure it was very hard for him when he wasn't sure of who he was. I also know he stalked a woman, and so I don't feel as bad for him. I think he's a menace in that game, and I think he's a menace in the game in a way that, as of right now, having only seen the first six, I worry he's the next Michael Rappaport in the sense of like a menace to the players, not just playing recklessly to find traders, but a menace to like people's mental health and mental game.
Mhm.
And I don't know because I haven't seen
Yeah.
beyond episode six, but
I will say one thing about, because again, the one thing that I will say about Colton that I have at least observed because I was curious, all the other players are still following him and agreeing to do press
yes,
with him, which is
that's
not the
true.
case with Michael. So
That's true.
so
Well, I
I
mean, I do think there was a lot Michael said that we didn't see. They gave him a nice edit. They gave Dorinda a nice edit. Apparently, she said some pretty hurtful things, and
yeah.
that's why Ron didn't want to talk to her. But NBC Universal has them both in a way. So like
Uh-huh.
they're gonna probably be nicer to them. And I will say, I I don't think Colton was like intentionally bad to anybody there. I don't think Michael was intentionally bad to anybody there. I just think that like the way that they can rub people the wrong way, I started to see things in Colton that I saw Michael do that I was like, I
Sure.
wonder if this is going to get to that level, but maybe it doesn't, and maybe that's good if it doesn't, obviously. I just don't know. I don't know these people personally.
Yeah.
I've met Colton like once, and I've met Michael, I think, once, but I know. a lot more about Michael just from knowing him and knowing people who have worked with him, knowing
Sure.
how he is on social. He's like the things he talks about, the way he talks about them. And I grew up in New York, so like his brashness is something I'm very familiar with. And so like
I
even his tone of voice, I'm like, I
Yes.
know you're not intending to insult somebody, but you sound like you're insulting somebody. And if you're not familiar with that, it's harder to know.
Well, and I also think it does get into, I don't know if you ever listen to Drop Your Buffs with Evan Ross
I
Katz and
have, but I'm not caught up. I feel like I'm
oh yeah,
very
yeah. No,
behind.
no. But one of the things that they said about both Colton and Rappaport is we might be flinching about what they're doing in ways that we wouldn't have 15 years ago within the world of reality television, comparing back to certain things in the mid 2000s.
Oh, for sure. We let a lot of things slide that we shouldn't have
Yeah,
let slide.
yeah.
And
Um,
but I don't think that's good.
no, no, but I also do think there is something to be said for teachable moments
Yes.
making television because I do think that is something that the real world was always so great about was allowing someone to make the mistake and then
Yeah.
facilitating education around it, not just for the people involved, but for the audience as a whole.
Yeah.
So, like, while I would venture the guess that Michael Rappaport and I agree on absolutely nothing at all in the world, maybe there is some good that comes from what is happening here in terms of conversations happening at all the homes who are watching.
Yes. But I will say that I think in that respect, the non-US seasons of The Traitors do a better job because
Totally.
they bring in people who don't know each other at all. Like
Yeah.
even in the Celebrity UK edition, I think there were a couple people who like sort of knew each other, but it wasn't the cliques that have formed on the US. Like we see it all the time whenever there are Big Brother people that go to the challenge, all of a sudden it's like Big Brother sticks with Big Brother and it's like, guys, why? Like you're not a hive mind. Why are you doing this? And I get that you're doing it for numbers and safety, but at the same time, like it's exactly what you said. Like with the real world, they were literal strangers. And
Mhm.
so sometimes you can say something to a stranger in a different way than
Yeah.
you can say it like when you're in this little mini gang within this bigger group. So that's the thing that I will say about the traders is that I don't like that whole housewives are supposed to stick together thing. I think that's dumb. I know why they do it. They did it on Celebrity Weakest Link too, and I thought it was stupid because some of them got a lot of answers wrong and they lost a lot of money because they refused to vote each other out. But whatever. But that's why when Lisa voted Portia, I was like, yeah, it's a little bit of a tell that like you're not supposed to do that, and so you maybe you feel a little safe, and that's why you're doing it. But I was also really proud that she did it because I was like,
Yeah.
don't just be a gang for no reason.
Well, I also will say my one primary frustration with the traders right now is the filming schedule, just
Oh,
by virtue of the fact that it limits the housewives we get,
yeah.
whatever cities are not filming. Because I will just
Yeah,
say I would love, 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 love to see Erica Jane in that
but
castle.
I also think, do you think she would do it? That's the thing. I think it's also like who would realistically do it? Do you know
I
what I
think
mean? Like I don't know. I'm out
I
of
think
all of
every
them.
I think every single person in reality television would do the traders. I
Okay,
do not think just because the reviews from the behind the scenes are so positive, you are
that's true.
so well taken care of. Everyone is treated with so much respect. Everyone is treated like they are a star, as they should be. I mean, I think a lot of the things that Trishelle said a couple years ago, I think were
Mm.
very telling of the reason everyone was able to deliver such a great show was they were all going home to their bed where they could rest and relax as opposed to communal living. And she was like, I remember an interview where she said, just imagine like who of us would go back on the challenge if we all just had our own bedrooms? Like, we will still deliver television for you. We don't need to be in bunk beds.
Right. That's always fascinating me. Like at this point, like Bananas is like 45 years old in a bunk bed. I was working for a company that needed to fly me to Texas and they wanted me to share a hotel room and I like absolutely not. And like I'm not anybody famous and
Oh,
I
I'm
wasn't
the
even 40
closest.
yet at that point. And I was like I'm too old for this. No, absolutely not.
No, 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 no. I've been in independent film now for 14 years, and if I'm traveling, I don't care how small the budget is, I will say it. Whatever is happening, I will have my own bedroom and my own
Yeah.
bathroom because that is the only
Yes.
way. you will
Yes.
get what you need out of
Out
me
of
on
everybody.
set during the day.
Yeah, I when I was in an independent film like 20 years ago, and I was on really low budget stuff, and I was sharing rooms at that point because I was like a script supervisor. So usually they'd put me like with one of the actors, and like we would both look at each other and be like, "This is insane," and like nobody was. We weren't on problematic productions. We were very lucky, but it was just like especially for an actor who like needs to prepare for the next day. I
Mhm.
always felt like I had to sit in my corner and be super quiet and like let them get what they need done, and that was like weird. It was a weird working environment. I don't know. We've gone on a tangent. But this was very fun, and
This
I
was so
appreciate your
fun,
time so
Danielle.
much. Okay, so before everyone jumps away from this episode, you know I like to tell you where to find the things that we talked about in the episode. And first up is the PBS re-recording of the original Broadway cast performing Into the Woods in about 1991, if that math was correct. That, I hate to say this, but is streaming on YouTube, which I hate to say because it may not be there legally. So it's not really my first recommendation. It should also be on the PBS app and on Broadway HD via Prime Video, or at least it was at the time of this recording, which, as we mentioned, was at the end of January. So a few weeks ago now, maybe even a few months ago now, if you found this super late. Hi, how are you? I'm happy to have you here no matter when you found it. We also talked about the challenge that streams on Paramount Plus. We talked about the Traitors, which was Lovell's influence. I could go on, and that streams on Peacock. And as we mentioned, because we taped this at the end of January, a few more episodes that we haven't even talked about have come out since then. So enjoy. And then, of course, his debut novel, The Book of Luke. I like to have the author, if there's a better place for you, tell everybody where to get it.
That is so kind. I have become a big believer in bookshop.org. They are great because what you can do there is you can designate the sales commission to go to a specific independent bookstore. Um, and which I think is wonderful. And just I if you go to my Instagram, there are tons of bookstores that I've been signing at. So if you're really looking for a signed copy, you can check the list there on my Instagram. But at the end of the day, a book is a book is a book, whatever is most convenient for you. I don't want there to be any hurdle to accessing the book, so please buy wherever is most convenient. But bookshop.org is absolutely great. And the audiobook is also out there as well if you're not looking for uh to turn a page.
Hmm.
My dear friend Charlie Thurston, who's currently on Broadway in Liberation, he did the audiobook for Demon Copperhead. He reads all the characters and no one could do a better job.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for listening and or watching. I just want to say that I just started this season. It's season 4. This is my first author of the season, but I'm very excited to have an author on so quickly, and I'm hoping to have many on in the future episodes. So stay tuned for more. We'll be back next week. I'm not going to tell you who we're back with. Just have to check it out.